On today's show, I am joined by Tyler Jones, our friend of the podcast, to talk about all things Hawks in a multi-part conversation. And the Hawks are heading to Mexico City, so we'll have all details on that and more, all of that on the way.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1527 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday afternoon into the evening. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, a special sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And also, I should tell you at the top of the podcast, make us your first listen each and every day. Please check us out and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. That includes places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, etc. And I am joined in a moment by my friend Tyler Jones, friend of the podcast, talking about all things Hawks in 3 parts. Yes, 3 parts. For the first time, I think maybe ever, but it's the first time in a while for sure. But a long conversation, and it's sort of worthy of the offseason at this point. There is a little bit of news, though, at the top of part 1 here, and that is the Hawks are heading to Mexico City. So the NBA announced on Wednesday morning that the Hawks are going to be playing against the Orlando Magic on Thursday, November 9th in Mexico City. I think I was the first person to report this, but it's actually going to be a home game for the Magic, meaning that the Hawks will not lose one of their 41 home games. That's actually a positive for the Hawks when it comes to revenue and fan stuff, etc. It's the 32nd game for the NBA in Mexico. Crucially, though, the first time the Hawks will ever play in Mexico. It's going to be at Arena CDMX in Mexico City. Tickets are not quite available just yet, but obviously some interesting stuff there. Not a ton to get into about this game. You know, there's some altitude concerns with Mexico City. The Magic is sort of it's a division game for the Hawks. It's one game on the schedule. We don't have the rest of the schedule just yet. We probably won't have that until August. But it's the first game revealed for Atlanta, November 9th, Mexico City. Steve Cohen gave a quote to the NBA. I think Landry Fields spoke to AJC about this as well. So a little bit of news there. If you're a Hawks fan, maybe a diehard that wants to travel to the team, might be a fun trip to get on the schedule in between now and early November. But one more time, a regular season game for the Hawks, Thursday, November 9th in Mexico City against the Magic, and that will be a fun one to consume for everyone around the league, and especially for, of course, fans of the Hawks and the Magic. Okay, without any further delay, I'll talk about everything on the Hawks agenda over the last month plus, from the John Collins trade to Dejounte Murray to the draft to Summer League to DeAndre Hunter to Pascal Siakam, all that fun stuff coming on the way with myself and Tyler Jones. Again, please stay tuned for part 2 and part 3, which both should be in your podcast feeds right now as well. And no more delay now. Myself and Tyler on the way right now. I am joined now for the first time in more than a month, and a lot has happened. Tyler Jones is back. Hello, sir. How are you?
I only have, got to start the pod with only one question. Ritter season.
It is Ritter season.
Going.
That is true.
First day of camp for your boys. It's your team, Brad.
My raw fandom of the Falcons still exists, so we'll see how this goes. My expectations are very, very low. By the way, if you do not know, this is what Tyler and I do. We talk about something random at the top of the podcast. So you do not find the Locked On Falcons podcast randomly on this show. But yeah, Falcons. Are you back in? I meant to ask you about this. Are you in? What's going on?
Am I back in? February 6th, was it February 6th, 2017 or February 6th, 2018? I can't remember.
17.
17? Yeah, it was definitely 17. I remembered it. Yeah, no.
Okay,
no.
Just thought I'd ask. Okay, well, with that out of the way, yeah, I mean, you and I thought about asking you a little bit ago, and then you had issues, and I had COVID, and here we are. It's July 26th. A lot has happened, some of which feels like it was a lifetime ago. Like, for instance, John Collins got traded like a month ago, and you and I have talked about John a lot on this podcast. I think you and I are probably two of the higher people on him. You're even higher than him than I am. But that happened. The draft happened. The Dejounte Murray extension happened. All the Pascal Siakam rumors have happened. Yeah, Summer League's gone on. I was in Vegas. I probably got COVID from Vegas, if I had to guess, based on the timeline. All those things. So we have a lot to discuss. But I'll just start here. Like, how are you? How are you feeling as a resident Hawks fan? How are we feeling here in late July?
Overall, like, for the future of the team, I'm actually
sure
pretty optimistic, just because, well, it's felt like since the trade deadline when the Hawks got 3 like real rotation players, including Sadiq Bey, along with Bruno and Gary Bird, for 7 second-round picks. Like, ever since then, it's felt like the Hawks have operated like an adult is running the team, if that makes sense. It just feels like, sensible moves, not home runs, but like the Sadiq Bey, just like, to get a talent like that for only 5 picks, like that's pretty good value. You get a backup center in Bruno Fernando, or a third center in Bruno Fernando, making right around league minimum. Like, that's who could potentially move up to being a backup center, depending on what they do with Capela. Like, that was good value. Like, Gary Matthews, a good like 11th, 12th man, like something they didn't have before that deadline. They did not have this. Now you look at this Hawks roster currently, even with the John Collins trade, still a fairly deep team. Still, so like, and it just feels like, unlike last year, if there are injuries, they may be able to like power through them in ways that they couldn't last year. Last year, if one guy went out, they were done. Like, even though, because I think on the last pod you talked about how the Hawks weren't that hurt. This is true, but when they were hurt, like they just had no shot. Like, they could not afford to lose one rotation player just because of how like weak the roster was. 10, like 11, it was like 10 through 17 or whatever. Like, they just didn't have NBA, like, in respect to like Justin Holiday, like he was like supposed to be the 9th man and 9th, 10th man, and he just didn't have it anymore. So like now you compare where they were last year to where they are right now. They've got a full bench, they got a full starting 5, like everything looks good. They might still have some more moves to make, but just the outlook of the team, I think it's pretty good from a general manager or executive perspective, at least to me.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, they paid some capital to do that, but we talked about it at the time, like they really increased their depth, and it's weird because there's a whole conversation to be had about like whether they're better now than they were on paper 6 months ago or 4 months ago, because essentially they just traded Collins for nothing, which doesn't make you better. It cleans your books up. You could certainly, that's not even a value judgment. I mean, you and I, again, are higher on John than others, but removing the value judgment, it doesn't make you better to trade on the court, to trade him for nothing. But you do have more depth now. And I think crucially, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, like you have Quinn Snyder now for a full offseason and going into a full next season. I think the combination of those two things should at least make up for losing Collins in theory, because I mean, you and I talked about this last year. I thought the whole year, I said as much, like they should have been better than they were, is the way that I would put that. Like, the talent on last year's roster was not the talent of a team that should have been where they were in the 9th, 10th spot for most of the season. Like, that should have been better. And I think now, I would argue, like, again, not trading Collins doesn't make you better, but you have so much better stuff like around, which is what you're talking about with the depth. I mean, adding Wes Matthews for nothing, again, not a sexy move, but a guy who can probably play, and he's not going to embarrass you. Like you said, you're keeping Garrison Matthews, keeping Bruno Fernando. The rookies are probably not going to help you a ton as rookies, but the depth is pretty strong. They have, and again, Portland, they have Quinn. So that all is set up pretty well, I think. We'll talk about like the transaction stuff too, but I generally agree with you. Like, I saw some of the overrunners starting to come out. The Hawks are pretty modest. I have a feeling based on the national temperature that I'm going to be higher on the Hawks this year than some people are.
The Hawks are getting like, based on the pods I'm listening to, because I'm back to listening to NBA podcasts.
We're back, baby.
Right now. But like, there's like a small little level of optimism with this Hawks team, and I think it has a lot to do with Quinn. Like, it's hard not to, like, to me, it's hard not to watch how the Hawks played in summer league, and I think if they can just get this level amount of 3-point attempts up, like, they're going to be good. Like, I think it's more complicated than that, because they got some issues to go off. The biggest thing they're going to miss without Collins is the defense. Like, that's really where he put his staple on this team. And like, I mean, in the playoffs, I don't even think it's much of an argument. He was by far the team's best defender. Like, just considering everything he did in the playoff series against the Celtics. So like that's gonna be missing, and it's gonna be interesting to see if this is the team they're gonna bring, how Quinn is going to marry offense and defense. Like, how is he going to get both of those things together? Like, is he going to try to do it with the starting lineup, or is he going to go defense to start and then offense off the bench and try to like mismatch it there? But then you kind of run into the same problems you did last year, where both Quinn and McMillan couldn't really find a cohesive unit that he could play for like extended stretches that was good on both ends of the floor. Like it's really tough with this team, but that's kind of, I mean, that's why hopefully they got some more moves to make maybe, but like it'll be interesting to see what they do. But like at the end of the day, they'll go with, like, to me, at the end of the day, just big picture, like if Quinn gets the offense right, I think they'll be good. Like that's my just general appraisal of the team. So I just think for this Hawks team, offense is just that much more important than defense. He has to get the offense where it's just like one of the top 5 at least. They honestly probably need to be top 3 in offense, and that's a high bar to clear, but they got the talent to do it.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball season is in full swing. You can take your first swing at betting MLB at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're a new customer, get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20. You'll win $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. FanDuel has great promotions each and every day. You get paid instantly when you win. The app is also safe and secure. Plus, they have every kind of betting angle that you're looking for that you might possibly ever want at FanDuel. They cover the whole range of sports as well. That includes baseball and the NBA, WNBA, college basketball, college football, NFL, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, and much more. And different wagering options as well present at FanDuel, from live betting to futures, player props, point spreads, totals, money lines, etc. There's no better place to bet all the baseball and basketball action that you're looking for than America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up right now today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get $200 in bonus bets right now at FanDuel. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Yeah, it's going to be kind of a throwback to what the foundation was that we've all talked about, you and me and Glenn and others and Kevin, about like, this is a team, as long as it's built around Trey and kind of the way it's been built, they have to be elite on offense to be where they want to be. And that was, because the defense was so bad for large portions of last season, it got probably under-discussed that the offense was not good enough last year. They were good on offense, but they weren't great on offense. And they have to be great because of the personnel they have. I mean, that's the thing. Like, once Quinn took over, they took steps towards great. They were back in that top 4 or 5 range. But for the full season, the numbers were what they were. They were pretty good offensively. But when you're carrying a defense that, was firmly in the bottom 7 or 8, like, all year long, that isn't good enough. And that's kind of the thing, what you just brought up about, like, trying to find lineups. We'll obviously have more on this in September as we talk about really previewing the season. But, like, one of the real concerns, or at least questions, about this team is like the ability to play two-way lineups, because you have some guys who are not like 100% one-way players, but you have these, like, to get enough shooting on the court, like, you kind of need Bogey and you kind of need Bay, and those guys are not offense only, but they're kind of offense only in some respects. And then, you're hoping Jalen's a two-way guy, but right now Jalen on defense is probably a little bit further ahead than Jalen on offense in the half court anyway. Your centers are still primarily defensive first players. They're not only defensive first, but you know what I mean? Like, they don't have a ton of guys who you just love both ends of the floor. And that creates some challenges for you, because you still want to be enough offense. And I think the best way to surround Trey always is, like, get shooting on the court. And I think we've seen Quinn leaning in that direction. All of the messaging, even Summer League, when they were bombing away from 3, like, I think all stuff that I hear behind the scenes even is like they want to surround the backcourt of Trey and Dejounte with shooting, at especially the 3 and the 4. But if you do that with the current roster, that means a lot of defensive questions. When their best offensive lineup right now is Trey, Dejounte, probably Bogey, and Bay, the 4 of those guys. You can't stop anybody with those 4 guys. And they probably know that, but, like, they might be so good on offense, it doesn't matter. So it's that ultimate trade-off of, like, trying to find that sweet spot of, like, where you can just do enough on defense while keeping your offense elite.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the rub. That's the rub with the team. I will say, though, just to talk about summer league a bit, less about the players and more how they played. Like it was encouraging how they rebound. Like it's weird to point out some stuff, but it was encouraging how they rebounded defensively, more like how the guards rebounded. Like I thought, particularly like when AJ Griffin was in, or he was like really getting after the boards in a ways that he hadn't done so. And so like hopefully what we're going to see is more activity from like Dejounte Murray on defensive rebounding, more from Trae Young, even defensive rebounding, and like naturally DeAndre and Sadiq. Like they just have to, everybody's going to have to step up. Like the biggest thing is that if people remember last year, the Hawks were actually pretty good defensively right up until Capela got hurt. And then they changed their defensive scheme and the defense just fell off. But they had to change it because like the way they were defending wasn't sustainable for an 82-game season. Like Capela just wasn't going to last playing this all-out defensive scheme, trying to cover for everybody. And Collins and Okongwu were just going to be in routine foul trouble. So like it's going to be like, to me, on defense, they have more, like, even though they don't have great defensive personnel, like Dejounte Murray is more talented than what he's shown. DeAndre Hunter has to be better defensively. And Sadiq Bey has to. The positive with me with Sadiq is like I'm not worried about his physicality or his effort level. Yeah. Like that doesn't concern me. It's more like scheme based. You can't make these execution errors. Like he has to, embrace that. He might potentially be starting. And like to me, this is where there's fluidity on what Quinn might do here. Is like if Bey and Hunter aren't cutting it, he has options to go to other people. That is the boon of this team currently. Whereas like, outside of the guards, outside of Trae and Dejounte, like truth be told, there are minutes are just going to go to whoever's playing the best that game, like to me. And so it'll be interesting to see like who rises to the top here, because I think everybody's going to get an opportunity to showcase that, hey, I deserve to be the 30-minute player on this roster. And like, for as much as I rag on DeAndre, he's consistently been a mid to low 30+ minute per game player the entirety of his career. That's in large part to do with the fact that he's never had any competition. Now he does, so it'll be interesting to see if he can, because like theoretically he should be that guy. And like you still see it in spurts, even though he's an older player. Like you see the shooting, like in the Celtics, the last couple games, like I felt like he really found something offensively that was more sustainable than like what the mid-range, quote unquote mid-range assassin that he was trying to be. Like he's really got to embrace the role as a 3-and-D wing. Like he has to do that because that's what they need from him. That's what they need from him as the team's best, not even best, but most consistent perimeter defender. Because like he's that, plus the positive shooting that he does bring. Can he shoot more threes? Like he has to do that. Like they need him to do that. They need everybody on this team to shoot more threes. And I think he and Dejounte are the big ones, because like those two guys are the theoretical two-way players next to the centers who while they can't create shots from themselves, they are good offensively, just how they operate. Like those are the guys that are going to have to step up for this team to really push, not just to be outside of the plane, but really push to where they want to be. Because this is not a team that's just okay with being the 6th seed. Like this is not, or being a first round, hard scrabble first round team. Oh, we gave the Celtics a good run. Don't we feel great, guys? Like this, to me, that's not how this team has been operating. Like they want to win a championship. They want to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals again. For that to happen, like to me, it's really like if DeAndre and Dejounte, like they got to step it up, like just period on both ends of the floor.
No, I totally agree, and I think your point is a good one about like no one's minutes are as locked in as they've been in the past, other than Trae and Dejounte. I think those are for obvious reasons. Those guys are going to play a ton of minutes, and they should. But yeah, Hunter has real competition. I mean, I know he's making a lot of money now. He's on the extension starting the season, but they have other options. They have AJ Griffin. They have Sadiq Bey, who can kind of do some things that DeAndre does. They have Jalen Johnson, who they tried more on the perimeter last year. Like, I think if Hunter I think if I had to guess, if Hunter's on the team, and we'll talk about this in more in a minute. If Hunter's on the team, I expect him to start opening night, but there's a chance that he just is not playing at the level, and he kind of loses time as a result. Same thing with guys like Jalen and AJ. We're very high on Jalen and AJ. They have to prove it. They got to play well to get their minutes. Like, no one's going to gift them minutes anymore. I don't think on the same level that maybe Hawks fans even want them to. Like, I think right now, Bogey's a lot more proven than AJ Griffin. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of people, and I understand why, want to see more of AJ. And it's not just those guys one-on-one, but they're kind of inherently battling for minutes, I think, at least some minutes, as the primary wing shooter in some respects. And like, Bogey's a better player right now today. And that's one of those things that you have to kind of juggle.
If Bogey is healthy, it's going to be like Bogey's healthy, ready to go. We kind of even saw it in the playoffs. Like, he's a difference maker. Like, he's a difference maker.
Bogey's really good when he's healthy.
Bogey,
really good.
Bogey is a difference maker in ways that, like, honestly, only Trey can emulate. If am I making sense here? Where like that's how much his shooting pops. That's how much attention he brings when he's on the floor as a shooter, and how respected he is as an offensive player. Like, to me, like, a big key is like, how much can Bogey play? Can Bogey get back up to being a 30-minute per game player? Because like when he's he's on the floor, can his defense hold up enough? Can his knees hold up enough for him to do that? I mean, he's not an old man. Like, he's 30, so it's like, it's not the end of his career. We're not talking about a 35-year-old Joe Ingles or something like that. Like, he's still in the prime of his career. So if he can bounce back from these knee injuries, we'll see how he looks in the World Cup. Like, the Hawks go on runs consistently when Bogey's on the floor, because that's just how dynamic of a shooter he is. And like, shooting,
you and I have both said this before. When the Hawks have been at their best the last 3 years, it has always been when Bogey is healthy and playing like Bogey. Always. Like, the big run. Again, we're repeating ourselves a little bit, but the 2021 run to the conference finals, Bogey had the best stretch of his career for about 3 months. Bogey didn't miss a shot basically for 3 months, and that was not a coincidence. When he's got it going, he is a guy that's different than everybody else on this roster. And it doesn't mean that you have to rely on him a ton. Like, if his knees are not going or whatever, I think that honestly, if it was me, you talked about getting his minutes back up in some respects, they might manage him even more this year. Like, last year, they only skipped him a couple times on back-to-backs, that kind of thing. I would almost do that more, because they can. I mean, goes back to the depth thing. You don't need Bogey to play 75 games. Like, Bogey being a 60-game guy would be totally fine. You got enough to go around other than that. But yeah, I think, he's a big key. You mentioned Dejounte and DeAndre. I totally agree about those guys. I think Dejounte's defense is going to be something that I'm looking at a ton. Obviously he just got paid, which is a different subject in some respects, but they need Dejounte to be better defensively. And I think that's something that only people like you and I, like diehards, really noticed. I think nationally, people have not really figured out that Dejounte took a big step back defensively this year, but it happened. If you watched them, he was not particularly good defensively, and they do need him to be better than that.
It's tough. I don't want to, because I like Dejounte, and I like him as a player, and I like him as a person, but like, his defense against the Celtics, like, that was the difference in the series. Like, if he was better defensively, they might have beat the Celtics, like, flat out. And it's not him guarding Jaylen Brown or him guarding Jason Tatum. It's him staying in front of like Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon, like him and DeAndre. Like,
he's got to find that middle ground again of being a.
He just like the blow-bys where it's like, that can't happen. Like, if you can't allow somebody of like, and Derek White's a good player, and like, he might getting a little bit too much. Because I think he shot a bit over his skis against the Hawks.
Hold on. While we're here, this is not gonna be a whole segment. Did you happen to see that people were listing? By people, I mean one person was listing the Celtics as a better backcourt than the Hawks. Backcourt, which does not include Jason Tatum. I don't believe. I was like, wait, who? What?
Does it even include Jaylen Brown? Like, Jaylen Brown.
Well, that's the thing. Even if you're generous and you include Jaylen Brown at the two, we're saying Derek White is on the level of Dejounte and Trey. Okay, interesting.
I mean, Pop thought so. I mean, Derek White made the USA team. Not Trey Young's never made it. So
I still have not done my my little editorial on Trey not being on Team USA, which is always funny because this is not the A team on Team USA. Not to go down that rabbit hole too much, but like if you look at the roster, they don't, other than like Ann Edwards, they don't really have like the stars. Like they're not getting the top guys. And Trey said he wanted to play. Like you would think that they would have brought Trey anyway. So I don't. It is tough. All right, that is it for part 1 of this 3-part podcast with myself and Tyler Jones. Please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. And please stay tuned. Part 2 and part 3 should be in your feeds shortly, if not already. Follow us on Twitter /X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me on Twitter /X at BT Rowland. And we'll have much more coming in this space. Again, part 2, part 3 should be available for you right now, if not right now, very, very soon. And we'll see you all next time.